Hi there, Corey Walter with SPED 513 here. Today we're going to talk about classic arcade video games. One of my favorites there, that was the intro music from Pac-Man, from way back in the day when I was growing up as a kid. One of the very popular arcade games of the very early days there. Let's go ahead and take a look at arcades, learn a little bit more about those, shall we? Video game arcades became very popular in the late 1970s and early 1980s. They were a great place for kids to get together, meet with their friends, socialize, hang out, just do all the kinds of things kids do. It was a great place to get away. They were very much, very similar to the way a casino would look to adults today. But one of the problems came is in about the mid 1980s, a lot of the video game arcades started to decline mainly due to home video game sales. With the rise in home video game systems, most kids just didn't want to get out. It was more convenient to stay home and play their favorite games. So let's take a look here. Why would anyone want to stay inside an arcade and play games all day? One of the biggest things there is it fostered a sense of competition. You could go hang out with your friends, you could go hang out with other kids. Pardon me. You could hang out with other kids that you didn't even know who they were. All you knew was that they had the high score on a game and you wanted to get the highest score. It gave you a great sense of accomplishment to be able to put your name up there and come back later in the day, later in the week, whenever, and see your name still up there and know that you had the best score and you were one of the people that made it there. It really doesn't require any athletic talent, none whatsoever. All you have to do is stand there and play a game. So let's talk about what kind of games are you familiar with. I've listed here a few of the very popular games from the early 1980s when video game arcades were really in their heyday. Games like Asteroids, which was one of the very first arcade games in 1979, Pac-Man 1980, Donkey Kong 1981, and Mario Brothers from 1983. Quite a ways back there, and still a very popular characters for Nintendo today. One of the very interesting things I found here was that in Donkey Kong, that was the very first appearance of Mario from Mario Brothers, and who went on to reprise his role in many, many video games over the years. Although back in Donkey Kong, he was called Jumpman. They didn't call him Mario until 1983, a couple of years later. So, video game arcades declined. Kids weren't getting out. They were staying at home playing games. There was a lot of video game systems back in the early days. Let's take a look at some of the more common ones here that you might be familiar with or some that you might have at home yourself. One of the early ones that was released was the Atari 2600 from Atari Systems. There was others like Intellivision, Coleco, Odyssey. There was a whole host of these video game systems where they tried to take these popular arcade games and transfer them over so you could play them at home. Many times it just didn't work. You could play them at home, it just wasn't the same. The quality wasn't that good. Your friends weren't there. You could invite your friends over to play, but it just wasn't as much fun. A few years later, Nintendo released an early console system with the Nintendo Entertainment System, which recently just came back as a miniaturized version with only a few games on it and sold out in no time at all. PlayStation was the next major console system. There was a few others in there. Sega released the Genesis system with Sonic the Hedgehog, which was pretty popular. But today, most everyone's familiar with the big three: Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox from Microsoft. And kind of the interesting thing there, PlayStation came from Sony, who was a movie studio at the time, and Xbox was released by Microsoft, who was known for making computers and Windows operating systems. Without being able to go out to the arcades to socialize with your friends, what's the point of staying home and playing games? Well, honestly, today kids can socialize while they're playing games. Many online systems, or many game systems like the Xbox, the PlayStation, Nintendo, they all have an online component added to them as well as PC gaming is still pretty popular. But with these online components, you can put on a set of headphones, have a microphone there, and you can talk to your online friends. And in many cases, you can make friends from all over the world. You may never meet them, you may talk to them in real life. It really just depends on how far you want to go with that. Kind of an interesting side note there, I was playing an online game a few years back, and one of the interesting things that happened was I met a player from Germany, and we stopped, and it was kind of an online world we were running around in, and we stopped and we had a conversation about U.S. politics, and I was trying to use my limited German skills. This other person was using their limited English skills, but we managed to have a very interesting conversation about the state of our country about 10 years ago, across the world, which was pretty neat to do. When you're playing online games, it allows you great degrees of socialization just because you can meet people from all over, from various walks of life. It really is a very freeing factor here because there's very few limiting factors for a lot of kids. In some cases, kids that may not have the best home life, they may often have online game systems to play. And in some cases, gaming has really become a huge phenomenon. In some places, games are held in sports stadiums with huge screens just so everyone can watch someone playing a game, similar to what it was like back in the arcades, just slightly different these days on a bigger scale. So, arcade games, they left us, home consoles are here. Where is everything going now? You can take a look at this graph and see in the mid 1980s, the blue line there represents arcade game revenue. The red line is pretty much home revenue. And you can see where everything topped out there in the early 80s and then just bottomed out. A couple peaks here and there. But for the most part, arcades just really died off. Home games really took off. And this graph goes up to about 2013. But one of the interesting things here is console gaming is really changing now, where the consoles are turning away from games and more into a home entertainment system. We now have cell phones where we can carry games with us, play online games, contact other people to play games right in our pockets, and we always have entertainment with us around the clock. Thank you again. This has been Corey Walter with a short history on video game art from arcades.